When you're trying to calculate monthly differences, sometimes you run into the issue that we have different numbers of days in different months, and calculating those is not a question of adding days, but of adding months. And there are two potential functions you might consider using here, EDATE and EOMonth. As we look at the data in columns B and C, each of these employees has a probationary period, and it varies, as we can see. We've got our starting dates in column B. The probationary period in the first case is 3 months later. We want to know this ending date, so we simply want to come up with an answer of September 4th. Now, do we add 90 days or 91 days, 92 days, 89 days? We simply don't have a number that stands for all the months. But the function EDATE allows us to come up with the calculation here to come up with the same day in the appropriate month. So here's our starting date, comma, here's the number of months, and as we press enter, it's September 4th. And as we double click and copy this down the column, we can see what else is happening. Do recognize, though, we might have a situation like we have in row 8 here. This is October 31st, 4-month probationary period. If you add 4 months, of course, there is no, and there never will be, any February 31st, so it simply reverts to the closest day in those examples. We don't have any other one quite like that, but you could imagine that happening from time to time. Now, what if this is calculated differently? In other words, this company says, okay, when your probationary period starts, your probationary period will end on the last day of that 3rd month. Instead of coming up with an answer like September 4th, we'd like to see September 30th. And the function we're using here is EOMonth, meaning end of month. We've got our starting date, which is B2, our probationary period 3. Now we get the answer. That's the last day of the month. Double click here, and we see what's happening in all the other cases. We're adding the 5 months, the 3 months, the 4 months, whatever, and then extending the probationary period until the end of the month. Now, the permanent status, let's say, after the probationary period would start the day later. So if we did have column D in place here, we'd simply write a function that takes this entry plus 1. We could certainly do that, do it that way, and that's just fine. But if we didn't have column D there, what we would do is simply make a change or use this same kind of a function here. Let's just start over with this. How about EOMonth, left parenthesis. Here's our starting date, comma, here are the months, right parenthesis. Now that would give us September 30th, but we'll simply add 1. This is for those situations where maybe we don't have the column D. So there's our entry that way, and by double clicking, we'll get the same kind of answers we got previously. But it's a different use and a different approach to how we handle this. There could be times too when we want to move backward using either of these functions. So we've got an end date right here for a project, perhaps, or probationary period. We don't know necessarily, but we've got an end date. This is how long the program was. What was the starting date? Equal EDATE, left parenthesis. Here's our starting date, comma, minus here. So what are we expecting to see here? The 7th of October of 2012. And that's the answer that we get. So we can move backward with these as well. Now, in certain worksheets, dynamic type worksheets, you might always need to have certain dates displayed. The last day of the current month. Remember, it's EOMonth that gives us last day of the month. And the current month, I'll just use the function today. Now, as I'm typing this, it's April 17th of 2013. But how many months forward or backward do I want to go? None. So it's 0, right parenthesis, enter. So that's the last day of the current month as I work with this. Now, as I open and close this file and as I move into May, at that point, this will read May 31st without changing the function at all. It works for today's date. And since we're not moving forward into any different month, it finds the last day of the month. Now, maybe you do billing on the last day of the previous month. So sometimes you might want to move backward. Equal EOMonth, today's date. Again, as I'm typing this, it's April 17th of 2013. So what's the last day of the last month? -1, right parentheses. And throughout the month of April, this is the entry that will appear here. So at different times, you do need to be able to calculate these different month differences moving forward and or backward using potentially either the EDATE or the EOMonth functions.